The South African Civil Aviation Authority, SACAA, is hosting a conference aimed at discussing ways to reignite the aviation industry. One of the sectors dealt a mighty blow by COVID-19. The virtual conference was attended by over 500 local and international delegates. Minister of Transport Fikile Mbalula delivered the keynote address. For more on the conference, we are now joined on the line by the Director of Civil Aviation, the CEO of SACAA, Khoza. Ms. Khoza, thanks so much for joining us here on SABC News. We appreciate your time.
Thank you. Thank you, Flo.
As a start, I want to talk about this conference that is currently underway. You spoke earlier on what is coming out of the discussions about rejuvenating this industry, and what was your contribution to all of it?
So thank you once again for having us. So this conference to us is very timely. In fact, it is a conference that would ordinarily host on a yearly basis, hosted by the South African Civil Aviation Authority. And really its purpose is to have the entire industry together with government to sit around the table and discuss matters that are crucial to the development and growth of the civil aviation, but also to touch on very critical matters of aviation safety, aviation security, as you have an appreciation, Flo, that in our view, each and every flight that takes to the skies, it must in fact culminate into a safe landing. So as you have clearly articulated, the theme for this year's conference, which was hosted, of course, virtually, and the Minister of Transport was indeed present, the captains of the industry, reigniting the aviation sector beyond COVID-19. As we know that many countries across the globe had closed borders because of the spread of the COVID-19. And the fact that, the perception in many people's minds is that the COVID-19 spread, in fact, as a result of, or rather the fast movement of the spread of the virus was through air travel. And therefore, one of the issues that we're discussing is about how do we recover beyond the pandemic. In fact, during the pandemic and beyond the pandemic, talking more about collaboration between government, the state-owned entities, as well as the industry in terms of striving to survive in the midst of all these challenges, but also to build that much desired confidence in the air travel value chain. We spoke about the role of advancing technology, because I can almost, speak with certainty that beyond COVID-19, things will never go back to how they were pre-COVID. And therefore, we need to leverage on technological advancement and many other innovation or innovative ways of ensuring that we stay afloat, we stay relevant together with the industry, and that we make air travel more affordable, more accessible. A minister was very, very stern, sent a very key message about transformation in this sector, which of course is still struggling for many years. And the minister is saying things need to change, and the time of just talking and repeating one message year in, year out is no longer helping. We need to come up with concrete targets in terms of how we're going to ensure that there is fair representation based on the demographics of our country in this sector. We talked about the issues of continuing to operate, in the midst of the virus, as well as to, as I did indicate, build that confidence so that air travel, as we know that many industries, many sectors depend on air travel, such as tourism and many other sectors. And therefore, how do we make it possible that we become that enabler of the much more needed movement?
Yeah.
So by and large, the themes were across the ones that I've mentioned. Of course, we also talked about the rate of accidents in the general aviation sector or private sector, as we saw the spike in the months of January, although it went down a little bit in February, but we still remain concerned, particularly as the regulatory authority, because our view is that one air crash, in as much as it's happening in the private environment, but the likelihood is that the resources that are in fact operating in the private sector would be the resources that would also be operating in the airline commercial scheduled operations. So we spoke about the skills. It was quite a packed conference. Of course, it's happening. Everything is being discussed in one day because of the nature of how we have conferences these days. But I actually think, based on the feedback that we are receiving from the participants and those that accessed through virtual platforms, that it was indeed a good conference to host, especially at time.
Yeah, so generally there is hope that the industry can then be revived, from what I'm taking from what you're saying. Ironically, though, this is the industry that was harmed by the advancement in technology. I mean, even the fact that you had this conference virtually, some of you would have, under normal circumstances, have flown in or flown to wherever, another venue perhaps. So I'm wondering, with all this advancement in technology that you point out, and saying that you want to leverage on technological advances, how is the Civil Aviation Authority, how is the industry itself able to leverage of something that would essentially be, killing it as an industry?
So from the Civil Aviation Authority perspective, one of the things we've looked, of course, you'll remember, Flo, that during the lockdown, the civil aviation continued to play a very active role in terms of cargo movement, in terms of the repatriation flights and evacuation flights and so on. But what was key was the issue of the maintenance of the licenses of the pilots in particular, as well as the maintenance engineers. And we had to leapfrog, forced by circumstances, towards really ensuring that we leverage on technologies. What could have taken us many years to realize in terms of the technological advancement, we were actually forced and pushed to ensuring that we do licensing through online platforms, for instance, to a certain extent, do a lot of inspections through desktop exercises. And therefore, what that experience has taught us is that, in fact, if we concentrate and put more resources towards innovation and technological advancement, there's a lot that we can achieve in terms of cutting down, the expenditure, cutting down the cost of doing business through technology. There's a lot that we can achieve. So there was a lot of exchange of ideas in terms of what is it that we can really do. Of course, some of these approaches are being discussed. We are seeing in other countries where they are also migrating towards online surveillance, changing, the surveillance models, for instance, to be more technologically inclined. And so it's a lot of things that we are really putting our heads together and say, perhaps if we do things differently, there's a lot that we can do. One of the technological advancement that, in fact, is also leapfrogging is the issue of the remotely piloted aircraft systems, or drones. Because, using just the technology during the times of lockdown has proved to be quite a great success. And of course, there are barriers in terms of entry because it's still fairly new in our environment, and we are discussing ways and means of how do we regulate this new technology into the civilian airspace such that, the integration is done in a manner that will still preserve safety. Right, so it's all those discussions really that we were engaged upon.
Yeah, and I can imagine we could still be talking about the issue of COVID-19 because we aren't, out of that storm yet. Is civil aviation worried about the impact of the third wave and its impact on an already affected industry? I wonder if this also formed much of the conversation. I mean, if we were looking last year, we had all probably thought that by now, talking about COVID-19 would be maybe a thing of the past. But here we are also having to deal with the possibility of a third wave. And I'm wondering how that would then affect the industry again.
So we did. In fact, we had a representative from NICD who gave us statistics in terms of the world trends, comparing the world trends with South Africa. What was very pleasing, though, is that as a country, we've done exceptionally well if you compare us with other countries. Other countries, they're already in the third wave. As you would have seen, perhaps even CNN remarked that we as the country have gone through the first wave, we went through the second wave, but we've managed through behavioral patterns that our government has been advocating over the past few months. We have managed to bring down the levels. As you would know, I think just last night just yesterday we recorded about, I think, 752. If you were to compare that with other countries in Asia, in Europe, you would actually have an appreciation that our government has done exceptionally well in terms of trying to minimize the spread of the virus across all sectors, including civil aviation. And Flo, you will remember again that our government took a decision to open borders as far back as June, when many countries, some of which have not even started to open up, but through a very systematic, procedure-driven process, in layered approaches that were introduced, as you will remember perhaps, that as you got to the airport, there were layered gates or layered approaches that one had to go through before you board a flight. And all those, put together, they actually did contribute drastically towards the minimization of the spread of COVID-19, even in civil aviation. So it was quite comforting, and it would make one proud to be South African, honestly, when we receive, and compare the statistics in terms of what is happening in other countries. If you compare with South Africa, we've done exceptionally well.
All right. Thank you very much for giving us your time, ma'am. Khoza is the Director of Civil Aviation, SACAA. Thank you so much for that. All right. Let's take a short break. More news after this.